Hi. 2000 is so far proving to be a fun year for Windows gaming, so let's see what else it had to offer. American McGee's Alice is a third-person view action-adventure 3D platformer. Things have changed a lot since Alice originally found her way into the Wonderland. She was orphaned by an accidental fire, losing both parents, and after many attempts at her own life, she was institutionalized and remains in catatonic state, wasting away with each passing day. And since Wonderland is connected to Alice in more than one way, it too corrupted beyond recognition. The Red Queen has turned malevolent, Cardguard keeps imprisoning people, the Mad Hatter went truly crazy with curiosity for clockworks, and overall, the Wonderland is more like Nightmareland now. Trademark pending. Broken or not, guilt doesn't let Alice stand aside and do nothing, especially that saving Wonderland may be the only way for her to restore her peace of mind and save herself. Pretty dark, isn't it? Well, Wonderland has been twisted, turned into a Barton-esque version of itself, dark, grim and truly demented version of Alice's psyche. Alice's gameplay is more centered around action than adventuring, so you use different kinds of weapons, here funny enough called toys, most with primary and secondary attacks, with that second being stronger but also depleting your will, so game's equivalent of mana. Fortunately, it can be replenished by collecting life essence from defeated enemies. And these weapons are really imaginative stuff, so Vorpal Knife, piercing playing cards, flame-throwing Jack-in-the-Box and Demon Dice among others. Imagine how fun they are. The enemies are rather varied and in tune with the books, albeit with game's twisted moody vibe added to them. So you'll battle with miniature Jabberwockies, Snarks, lava monsters or rogue chessmen among others. They're all visually striking, same way the rest of the game is, and Alice is just a treat for the eyes all the way through. There are bosses in the game too, and they're really challenging, much more than in other similar games. And for the most part, they simply require having their asses well whooped, rather than figuring out complicated mechanics to beat them. The Wonderland, changed or not, is still an enchanting place to visit, full of vines to swing on, ledges to hang from, and tons upon tons of jumping puzzles. Like way more than you'd ever thought necessary. So it goes without saying that American McGee's Alice is a true work of art in terms of its presentation. The world, the enemies and even the goth version of Alice, all of that looks stunning and very, very atmospheric, making the whole fair a pleasure to go through, even if it's largely a linear adventure with pretty repetitive gameplay loop and a bit too many jumping puzzles for my liking. I adored Alice when I first played it. It was a visual and often unpredictable in its design experience like no other at the time, and if there was one thing that I'd like to change in it for it to become even better, more iconic title, I'd like the story to be more fleshed out throughout the adventure, as at times it felt as merely a jump-off point, with not enough substance added along the way. It's still a recommendation, even if Alice's perverted version of Wonderland is definitely not for everyone. Delta Force Land Warrior is a sequel to Delta Force 2 and a first-person shooter developed to simulate US infantry soldiers, along with advanced combat tactics and equipment used by them on series of over 24 realistic missions/assignments. At the time of its release, Land Warrior was as realistic as it was possible to achieve on PC. So all weapons are carbon copies of these used by US Army, the ammo is heavily limited, and the game favors accurate shooting rather than going through all the max in just a couple of short bursts. You can pick up weapons from downed enemies and use them too, and best of all, no one, not a single enemy or even you for that matter, are a bullet sponge. And one, at most 2 hits, and it's bye-bye, for the buddies and you alike. Now, all this may make Land Warrior feel rather demanding at first, and even more so in the heat of the moment when being surrounded or approached by a group of enemies. At least until you realize that it's not a typical FPS at all. You're not expected to run in headfirst and engage all groups of enemies one after another. It's not one of those games at all. What you are supposed to do is prepare. Observe the mission area, examine your objectives, think of all the ways that you can achieve them, plan the route you'd like to take in and out, if possible using the element of surprise, and don't rush. Slower is faster. And also, if you can take a sniper rifle with you and use it, then take that goddamn sniper rifle and do use it. Picking enemies off from a mile away, with them not knowing where the shot came from even, and no visible target to focus their fire on, is a godsend. In fact, I'd risk saying that using the sniper rifle turns this otherwise rather demanding game into one easier than expected. And you know what? It's probably what the devs intended for, as that's how it would be in real life. Distance, after all, not only gives you a feeling of security, but that aforementioned element of surprise too. Anyway, if you decide to skip the sniper rifle for whatever demented reason or can't use it, then stealth and sneaking is the king. Slow, methodic approach and patience. So, if any of what I just said sounds interesting to you, don't skip it. It may not look great today, but it's as playable as it's always been. Oh, I should mention too that Land Warrior featured a multiplayer mode with up to 48 of you running around shooting each other, but finding the right server was never easy as there were plenty of cheaters using the hill sniping glitch, where they could stay hidden behind a hill and glitch shoot through it from a place of complete safety. Some would say it's game designers' fault for leaving such an exploit in, and it's partly correct, but I also think that it's a choice a particular player decides to make to break the game and make it not fun for everyone else. Infestation is a futuristic sci-fi vehicular action shooter. In the year 2237, humanity has spread all around the galaxy, and using a network of warp gates, allowing for faster-than-light travel, colonized numerous habitable planets. As much as we're prospering, conquering the unknown and bending the planets to our needs, I think the word here is terraforming, we're also loud. I mean, I know that sound does not travel in vacuum of space, but it's not the sound that we were loud with, but change. We were loud with change, and soon enough, someone picked up on it. Now, aliens can be peaceful or they can be aggressive, and if they were peace-loving kind here, you know, the ETs of the future, we'd not have this game, so you can guess which of them started pouring out of the warp gates in response to our actions and laying destruction to our colonies. And since the colonies were spread apart and definitely not ready to face a full head-on attack, you, my dear viewer, being the universal hero with both skills and experience to pull it off, are given a prototype morphing vehicle and are sent into the heart of the alien invasion to stop it. Infestation is chock full of action. I mean, from the first mission to the last, you will be constantly driving around alien-looking planets and blowing stuff up, usually both at once, and completing a variety of mission objectives. These are truly aplenty and varied, and anything from busting out POWs from alien prisons, through destroying force field generators and unlocking new areas to conquer, to running away from a volcanic planet about to be wiped out by a gigantic eruption. You won't get bored playing Infestation is what I'm saying here. Your vehicle can transform into numerous different forms unlocked throughout the campaign, so while you start with an armed, fast and nimble basic buggy, soon enough you'll get access to other, more exciting ones like super fast skimmer, Bigfoot that can drive over water, or flying heli jet among others. And picking the right one for the challenge ahead can make it considerably easier. There's also tons of weapons and other upgrades in the game, but it won't take you long to find your faves while trying them out, and you'll only swap them out when particular enemies respond better to a certain kind of damage. Though it has to be said here that plasma cannons are the right call for the most that you will encounter. Perhaps not all, but it's a very versatile weapon and one that should serve you well throughout most of your adventure. In some missions you can control or capture factories, and these are used to manufacture all of the upgrades, be it in terms of armament or new transformation modes for your vehicle. Having this made, however, requires spending red, green and blue crystals that can be occasionally found around the game world, usually close to mines. To manufacture anything you'll need to have plans for it, and these can be acquired by dropping pieces of technologies near scientists and then by picking them up if a little light bulb appears over them after they got access to that particular tech. But upgrades aside, the main part of the game is naturally action, and it will take you to many corners of the universe and you'll be freely able to travel between them using the warp gates. It's worth noting that you can only save the game at these warp gates, so chances are you'll fly through them more than you'll realistically need to. The enemies will come in many shapes and forms, and most importantly in large numbers, so you'll have your hands full in no time. Or your cannons red hot, you know, potato, potato, tomato, tomato, alien, green man, whatever. Infestation is definitely not the best 3D arcade shooter out there, probably not even of 2000, but it's no doubt a fun one and you won't get bored playing it. Elasto Mania, despite looking like something that spawned at the tail end of 1993, is probably one of the most important releases of 2000. Well, to me personally at least. Mainly because I used to play it with a good friend of mine back then, alternating and switching only when a particular level was completed or if one of us failed. He's sadly no longer with us, but I still consider it a fun memory. Anyway, Elasto Mania is a sequel to Action Supercross and, for the lack of a better description, a vehicular side-view arcade puzzler, and one that's more unique and weird than most we've talked about today. You're on this cross bike and have to complete increasingly more demanding stages by collecting all the apples in them and then getting to the exit in the form of a flower. I know, sounds hella stupid, and it looks and sounds rather dated too, but don't let the presentation or its oddities fool you, it's low-key the best non-story game in today's entire video, and one of the best for the entire year. The bike is a subject to a rather well done, even if heavily oversimplified physics engine, so you can perform various tricks, daredevil-worthy jumps or hangs, and everything that you can imagine to do with your bike is a loud and fair game, provided you can do it. And regardless of how crazy it looks, for as long as your character himself doesn't touch the ground. Now, I wouldn't call Elasto Mania's physics true to life, but they're sitting somewhere in an ideal midpoint between realism and fun, making it devilishly addictive and fun to go through. You can skip up to 5 levels if they happen to be too demanding at the time, and the only way to replenish the skips is to come back to them and complete them. It's a fair model, I feel, and one I would like to see in more puzzle games, just letting you ignore the stages you can beat to carry on playing, with a chance of coming back to them later on to fix your former mistakes. The best thing about the game, however, are the levels. While they start easy, letting you familiarize yourself with all the controls and get dragged into this hella fun game, they get more demanding fast, but never too difficult to be considered annoying. And if you go through them one after another, you should be able to work out how to beat most puzzles in just a few tries. And those that you want, you can always come back to. The levels are super fun designed, utilizing many jumps, hangs and tricks for completion, and the sooner you master all of these, especially the upside down one-wheel hang, the better you will do. Some levels have spikes too, which are obviously an instant kill, so should be avoided, but other than that and the layout of the stages, there are no other enemies or obstacles in the game at all. Shower version comes with 10 levels only, and it's the first 10 too, so while not very demanding, they're a good taster to what's to come in a full version, which is composed out of 50 of these and comes with a built-in editor. Either way, deceptively bad looking and terrible sounding Elasto Mania is probably the most fun you'll have all week. Warlords Battlecry is a real-time sequel to the turn-based fantasy strategy series Warlords that no one thought that they wanted, and nearly everyone who tried it loved it. It's a surprise on many levels and a game definitely worth a mention, if not a full review. Now, once again, so that we're clear, I am not a fan of the RTS genre, so my personal experience with it is very limited, but I'll try to tell you as much as I know about it, supplemented with all the info that I found on it online. Two magical tears fell from the heavens, red and white, Deucephus and Navarre respectively, red capable of bringing death and destruction to the world, and white offering life and healing. They're the most powerful artifacts that the world had ever seen, and whomever claims them will be a force to be reckoned with. And while some may want to use them for good, some are not all. So humans, dwarves, barbarians, minotaurs, all kinds of elves, you know, wood, high, dark and closet elves, with closet ones being those magical creatures that live in your closets and always hide your favorite t-shirts and steal your socks. And naturally, the undead all want the tears, and they will stop at nothing to get them. Warlords Battlecry is one of the last 2D RTSs from the genre's golden era, and an excellent game in its own right. It features a large story-based campaign split into 6 chapters, 12 different victory conditions, and offering 8 factions to pick between, heroes with upgradable skills, hundreds of different units and countless maps to play on. And it's worth pointing out that the factions are not just the reskins of one another, and all of them play in their own way, have their unique to them strengths and weaknesses. Heroes retain their stats and skills between the missions and can even carry their most experienced units with them, and managing them is truly a balancing act, as you need to use them in battles for them to grow and progress, while in the same time make sure to protect them, because they represent you in the world of Warlords. So, if they die, it's game over. In fact, while being an RTS through and through, Battlecry feels a lot like light RPG too. Even more so because heroes can also go on quests, and if they manage to complete them, they will be rewarded with either strong allies or magical items. It may seem like a waste of time to quest in an RTS, even more so in one where there's so much stuff to manage, but the rewards are definitely worth it. So, if you manage to find a minute, definitely consider questing. There are 4 resources in the game: gold, metal, stone and crystal, and they are used for all, buildings and units. If I was to compare Battlecry to any other RTS, I'd say it plays the most like Age of Empires, adding its own unique races and twists to it, so stuff like heroes, magic, quests and multiple endings. It's perhaps not the best game in the genre, but it was easily one of the best for the year. The Operative No One Lives Forever is a third-person shooter set in the 1960s, in which you play as foxy former thief, now sexy secret agent in training, Kate Archer, working for the Unity, a worldwide secret espionage agency. As the evil organization known only as Harm, yup, Harm, removes your fellow agents from this plane of existence one by one, you are finally given a chance to shine. I mean to head off on a field mission, cause you're you, so you've always been shining. And also, while the circumstances are not the best perhaps, you really don't look a gift mission in its objectives, or however that saying went. Anyway, you are given a very simple in its main task mission of tracking down and investigating off-harm activities to find out why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and to stop it, which will take you around the world and quickly evolve into a much more complicated, Hollywood-like plot resembling a James Bond movie spoof. So you'll be put in numerous humorous situations in which you'll need to perform very agent-like activities. So sniping, stealing, scuba diving around sunken ships, assassinations, free-falling out of an airplane while fighting off enemies mid-air, sneaking, in fact a lot of sneaking, mostly sneaking when I think of it, then some shooting, cause an agent has to shoot, or explode things from time to time, that is usually then followed by a daring escape or even more sneaking, sometimes both. A little bit of loving, every agent deserves a little romance after all, though that one's not a given, and I may be imagining things. But you know what is a given? Yes, you got it right, sneaking, and you'll do much more of it. Well, truth be told, while the focus is placed on it and the game is designed in a way that promotes quiet and stealthy approach, you can theoretically try to go through most of it guns blazing, jumping into action head on. It's not advisable and often makes it a much more difficult fare, but it's possible. So, No One Lives Forever is at heart a stealth shooter with all of its levels designed around that premise. It rewards extra points for staying out of enemy's sight and arms you with numerous gadgets that will help you to do so efficiently. So stuff like body remover powder, cigarette lighter welder, lipstick explosives, lockpicking barrette, or photographic sunglasses among others. The attention to detail and love for gaming is more than prominent in No One Lives Forever in each and every section of it no less. The missions are fun, but also very creatively designed, with some of them, I shit you not, being some of the best that I've ever played in FPS to date, and everything that the game is built out of is great here. The enemy AI is also something noteworthy, as they will react to you and your actions in an active manner, running for cover, flipping tables, grouping up or trying to surround you. They will even change weapons depending on the distance, and they won't stop looking for you when they take a peek at you somewhere first. So they don't just magically ignore you killing some of their friends and return to their patrol routes after 5 minutes of searching like they would in many other games. The alarms don't stop, and if the enemies know that you're there, they will look for you continuously. So, it's clear that the gameplay is the highlight of it all, but I wouldn't like you to ignore the omnipresent humor either, as No One Lives Forever is overflowing with it. The conversations you eavesdrop on, the situations and twists you get involved in, and the movie-like long cutscenes, all of it will have you laughing all throughout. No One Lives Forever is easily not only one of the best games of the year, but dare I say it, one of the best shooters ever made. Talking about some of the best and most important games ever, Metal Gear Solid. One of the most cinematic experiences of the late 90s and early 2000s. It is literally an action-adventure spy movie in which you can take an active part and actually be the hero to save the day. It's a third-person top-down stealth action game, and one that you'll most likely either fall in love with or completely ignore. I somehow managed to land somewhere in the middle there, as I did played it and loved it, albeit on PC and not original PlayStation release, but I've never completed it. I can't tell you why today because I don't remember, but I suppose it must have had something to do with some other game releasing at this similar time. Maybe Diablo 2, maybe Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Complete, or maybe something else. Point is, I've not reached the ending myself, and it's one of the few video gaming regrets that I have. Anyway, you play as a secret agent / super soldier codenamed Solid Snake, a legend in the field, a legend of the field too, and I heard that a legend in bed too, though that last may have not aged well since the year 2000. I mean, we have different colored pills today, red, green, blue, so perhaps it's still accurate. Point is, I'm not the one to check. The story sets up with TERRORISTS seizing a nuclear disposal site in Alaska, and you're called in to deal with it. As the plot progresses, however, numerous twists and turns happen, and while it initially seemed like a potential disaster in the making, with so many layers and threads to it making it difficult to follow, very soon it begins unveiling into a very involving, captivating and well-written tale that could have easily been made into a movie. As every time when you feel that you know what to expect and what's about to happen, something else does, keeping you on your toes all throughout it. As much as the story is fantastic, even if I only highlighted it here superficially, and that's by choice no less, not to spoil it too much for you, the true star of the show is the gameplay, which for its time was something else. Metal Gear Solid took things other games did before, put them all together, and polished them so hard that they became so shiny that you could see them from the International Space Station. Hardly any game at the time in a similar action-adventure genre could compare to Metal Gear Solid in playability. In short, it's a sneaker. As in a game where you sneak around, infiltrate the enemy complex and perform tons upon tons of stealth kills, and not a shoe. I'm definitely not talking about shoe. So, instead of running into enemies guns blazing, you're moving about stealthily, going for the slowest fast approach and avoiding guards where possible. If any of them spots you at any time, the game enters so-called alert mode, in which they attack you on sight and call for backup. What's more, all cameras, turrets and guards in the alert mode keep searching for you actively rather than just following their pre-assigned patrol routes. The whole stealth this, stealth that talk here doesn't mean that you can't kill in Metal Gear Solid, it's plenty enough that you can't do it in real life, so from time to time, when a particular section cannot be completed in hiding, you will have to dispose of the enemies, preferably in a fast and quiet manner. So snapping their necks from behind or by using silenced pistol is the way to go. I mean, there are regular guns, rifles and tons of explosives for different occasions available at your disposal too, but I'd consider them the last resort and not the default go-to. What Metal Gear Solid is best known for though, are the things you can do to hide or redirect guards' attention to other areas. So you can knock on the walls to have them move there, or you can hide in/under cardboard boxes and many more. While most enemies are simple guards, you do have to tackle a more difficult boss enemy every now and then too, and these are extremely fun to fight with. And best of all are unique and defeated in a different way, applying different weapons and tactics. It's a blast, both literally and figuratively speaking. Well, Raven shows up twice through your adventure, but each of those fights is completely different, so he's not really an exception. PC version of Metal Gear Solid is virtually identical to PlayStation Original with a few very notable changes. First of all, it includes a high resolution and high color support, so the game looks incomparably better than it ever could on Sony's system. Secondly, it comes with the first-person mode, which is hella useful, especially in those places where default camera used to act a bit odd. And finally, additional VR missions, which may seem like just a training add-on to the entire game, while in fact if you give them a little time, you'll quickly realize that there's so much more, and as good as the main game is, well, short of the story. So, it goes without saying that I wholeheartedly recommend trying Metal Gear Solid out if you never had a chance. And if you did, then you just probably sat there munching on something and nodding your head while I was talking. Perhaps bacon. Why am I even talking about bacon? I must be losing it. Anyway, back to our scheduled programming. Panzer General 3 Scorched Earth is the fourth mainline entry in the turn-based historical wargame series and arguably the best of them all, or as good as the first one was if you're someone who believes the original was the finest of the first three. The biggest change between it and earlier ones is that it focuses entirely on the Eastern Front, which is great, because it was technically speaking the biggest of all fronts during World War II, and oddly, usually overlooked or ignored by movies and games. Hard to tell why, but I'd bet on tundra and snow not being very attractive, both visually and in terms of temperatures. Anyway, you'll take part in battles of Moscow, Stalingrad, Warsaw, Berlin and some smaller ones too, covering the entire Eastern Front campaign. In fact, there are 4 campaigns included, 2 for each Germans and Russians, and each can run between few and just under 20 individual battles depending on how you do in them. Given that the campaigns are branching in Panzer General 3, the game is much more replayable than the earlier ones were. The addition of the campaign editor is also new, and it comes with tons of available maps and plenty of settings. Most interesting of them being ability to add British and American sides to the conflict despite them not taking part in the built-in campaign. So it's definitely something that helps Panzer General 3 stay fresh for longer. Other than that, not much has changed mechanically from Panzer General 3D, so it's still leaders gaining XP and not units, and they can provide huge bonuses to those that they are assigned to and also reassign when necessary, though that comes at the penalty. These leaders have few different stats that they're described with, and most important of them all has got to be the promotion rating. Which sounds complicated, but if you reduce it down to its basic function, all it really correlates to is how many actions their unit will be able to take in combat. They also receive medals, which offer them, well, let's call them powers or abilities. Yeah, abilities sounds better, and these are special actions and passive upgrades to units. Clearly, they are the most important part of any well-working army, kinda like they tend to be in real life. Same as its predecessor, Panzer General 3 used line-of-sight mechanics, which means that all kinds of traps and ambushes are possible, only depending on the craftiness of an army leader. So, you, my dear viewer. There are a few different mission types in the game, so anything from occupation and holding of a particular location on the map, through destruction of specific enemy units, all the way to having to move your units to an exit hex. But the biggest variety in it all is naturally served by the enemy forces unit composition and maps. All in all, Panzer General 3 is the most polished and well thought out entry ever since the first game, and definitely worth time of any and all wargame lovers. Sudden Strike is a World War II real-time strategy wargame like no other, and an excellent contrast to Panzer General 3 that we've just spoken about. Like exactly opposite to it in its design and forfeiting the RTS genre base building and management element entirely. It focuses on realism of combat and brings set combat into the forefront of gameplay, letting us focus on strategy and tactics of different battles and operations instead of micromanagement, which in a real-time game following real history events is really unnecessary. Sudden Strike is composed out of numerous campaigns for both sides of the conflict, allies and axis, and serves them in a succeeding mission format, with each of them having their own particular objectives. What's interesting, some of the missions are not putting you in a position of more or less equal power when facing the enemy, and you have to complete them smart rather than by diving headfirst all in. I don't want you to think though that the conflict has been minimized to micro-skirmishes and guerrilla warfare, as there are over 100 different units in the game, and some combat encounters can have up to 1000 of these involved at once, so as many as real-world battles had back then. What's more, all these units are painstakingly recreated to be as authentic as possible, so they are appropriately resistant to damage, cause as much of it as they would in real life, and require resupply and repairs. Oh, and basically anything you see on the map, from the smallest trees all the way to the biggest buildings, is destructible. Some things entirely, some to a certain degree, but it all adds a lot to the realism and most importantly fun of gameplay, which in itself is also very action-packed, at least for an RTS, and you'll hardly ever feel as if you're waiting for something to build or trade, like you would in other games in the genre, and you always keep doing something. Be it scouting new parts of the map, going for the mission objectives, fighting on few fronts, or quote-unquote cleaning up a path with your stronger units for those susceptible to damage. You know, an escort type of a mission. There's so much to do in Sudden Strike you wouldn't believe, and it's one of the very few RTSs that I actually can imagine myself really getting into, as it abandons that whole resource gathering, base building and unit farming trifecta, which I find rather tiresome. Anyway, use of active pose and waypoints is also a fun addition, especially for someone like myself, as it doesn't change the game's overall RTS theme at all, while catering to gamers who like to take things slower, strategize and plan out moves of all units under their control down to a singular order or waypoints in their movement. It's like a World War II version of Baldur's Gate, short of quests and storyline. Your units can naturally capture enemy machine guns, mortars and even artillery, and it all adds a lot to the fun factor. Sudden Strike's presentation, in terms of both sounds and graphics, is fantastic, and I really appreciated sticking to 2D rather than going for what most other games did in 2000, so forcing 3D into everything just because it looks good in big, large, shiny lettering on a game box as a feature. Sticking to the older, but more polished and detailed kind of a presentation allowed Sudden Strike to be overflowing with tons of tiny details and charm that simplistic by 2000 3D couldn't really handle at that fidelity. Following on the theme of unusual RTSs, Majesty the Fantasy Kingdom Sim is just that, a real-time fantasy kingdom simulator, and for all intents and purposes it could be considered a reverse tabletop RPG with some management mixed in. What? How? Why? You may wonder? Well, let me explain from the very beginning. Majesty places you in the comfy, fluffy and warm shoes of the new king of a fantasy kingdom of Ardenia, who aims to reclaim and reunite the kingdom, freeing it from all the monsters and evildoers. The thing is, neither of them wants to give away their claimed lands without a fight. So you need to convince them that your rule is the best rule, preferably with the use of sword and a shield, sometimes with a couple of high-velocity accurately placed arrows and sometimes with a fiery spell. You know, like all great rulers do. So, to simplify it, you do it by sending your heroes to deal with them. What's unique about Majesty, however, is that you don't issue orders to any of the units directly. You're a king, after all, and not a general or any other simpleton leading unit, so you do not mix with your subordinates. What you can do to nudge, nay, to attract the heroes' attention to particular areas of the map or enemies, is place bounties, so rewards that will motivate them to try to deal with the problem at their location. Majesty's control scheme is a very unique concept and one oddly similar to Sims, as outside of these bounties, the heroes can do whatever they please, and they do whatever they please, going about their own business and doing their own thing. Since we're on the heroes, however, there are naturally different kinds of them, from gnomes and warriors through rogues to paladins and wizards, among others. And all of them are unique, have their own personalities, skills and levels. Naturally, successful combat encounters allow heroes to level up, progress and get better, and as an extension of that, more useful. So while you don't control them per se, it's good to nurture them on the easier tasks first, to let them bulk up, before sending them to challenge more difficult tasks. The only resource in the game is gold, and everything is built with it. You don't mine for it though, but acquire it through tax collectors patrolling your kingdom's buildings, through heroes as purchases, cause yeah, they make those, after all they do control themselves without any input on your side, and through the treasure chests found on the map. In essence, Majesty is a huge balancing act and nothing more. You must balance what building constructions you spend gold on, set up manageable henchman limits and levels of the established bounty rewards. So, you must keep the kingdom afloat and expanding, all the while making sure that it's safe for the citizens and that the heroes keep getting better and better. And heroes are your most important, well, let's call them resource, nay, asset, because while the henchmen recruit themselves automatically up to the setup value limit and divide themselves into all the professions, so city and palace guards, peasants, tax collectors, caravans and the likes, and they run your day-to-day kingdom operations autonomously, it's the heroes that can claim new land, fulfill the bounties and grab treasure chests. Majesty's gameplay is unique, surprisingly fun and unexpectedly addicting. If you're on the lookout for a game that's unlike any other and also a lot of fun, it's definitely one to try out. Especially that its 18 mission strong campaign following a linear story teaches you all the concepts gradually and never leaves you feeling lost or confused. It's amazing, check it out. A very strategy heavy episode today, but you know, if they were good or interesting, they had to be mentioned. Anyway, what do you think of today's games? Any of them spark up your interest, or maybe you've played them all? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.